Hello and welcome, new and true friends. Thank you for taking time to listen or view this episode of Going to the Roots. And I decided to bring this point across about about healing with ancestors, because a lot of us don't even know who our ancestors are, or we have some kind of idea, but haven't really built a relationship with them. So I'm sure everybody's heard of different technologies or sites such as ancestry.com and finding ancestors and the origins of where they might have lived. And there's something about discovering more about ourselves that makes us feel closer to something that we have lost touch with for generations. And I myself have an interesting background that most of you probably would never guess, that I'm actually 14% Native American. My grandmother is Mexican. So when I took my ancestry.com, and I'm not plugging them whatsoever, this isn't something for you to sign up for or anything like that. I'm just explaining my experience. When I took that test and got the results back, I was surprised, but then not, because of where my intuition comes from, where I have this kind of shamanism energy work. And so knowing that I have 14% Native American in my DNA, in my physicality, it just made a lot of sense to me. But here today, we're to talk about possible hidden secrets that could maybe be tied to shame and where our ancestors came from. And it's mostly tied to the trauma and the struggles they endured. And most of our families, it passing down through the generations, they didn't share or acknowledge this because it ensued so much pain and hurt from the past. And what we're told is we need to forget the past and focus on the future, on the present. So I want you to remember that our ancestors are still living through us. They're within us, in our DNA. So when we choose to heal the deeper parts of ourselves, we're also healing our lineage of past, present, and future. And this is why I invited my next guest for this series, who is a very dear, special friend of mine that I've known. And when I think about her, it's like, well, I've known her all my life and many lifetimes. I'm serious when I say that. And I'm sure each and every one of you has a special friend or somebody that you know that you can relate to that. It's like, oh, it just seems like I've known them all my life and more. And her name is Marybelle Harris. And she is here today to share her story of how she was able to go to the roots of her lineage, witness what showed up for her, and how her compassion for them and herself allowed her to heal present day. When Marybelle began the ancestral work, she was shocked. She shared this with me to discover that she really didn't like her ancestors, which meant that she really didn't like many aspects of herself. And she asked this question because who are we if not the DNA of our ancestors birthed into new form? All that genetic memory bubbles underneath the surface of each of us. And the further Marybelle has traveled spiritually, the more she has experienced a sense that she's walking kind of a maze of pathways as she's uncovering more and more about herself as she connects with her ancestors. So Marybelle is here today to shed some light about her journey and hopes to offer some insights and guidance to support you on your own journey with your ancestors. Well, Welcome, Marybelle. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, April. This is just such an honor for me and just amazing. Yeah, I hope our discussion just really helps people to start discovering these things for themselves.
Yes, and you've done so much work, a lot of work, a lot of research. But before we unpack that, can you just share a little bit about you and how you started on this path of working with your ancestors and going to the roots?
You know, well, I will, when I started on this path, it was because right out of college, I married very much a person who was not truly good or healthy for me. But, I was fearful. So much of my life was controlled by fear all through my
Mm.
childhood. And when I decided, I mean, I finally turned to the divine and was like, I keep making decisions that I'm not happy. I'm
Mhm.
miserable in my life. And what can I do to change this? And that's when I decided it was time for me to separate from him. And that's really the first moment that I feel like I like picked up my staff and stepped onto the spiritual seeker. And I know, when I go back now and think about my childhood, even my birth,
Mm.
biggest wound that I've been healing, it's been abandonment issues. And I think that's almost everybody, um, especially in this country, which is a wonderful country to be in, but we're all kind of expected to homogenize and forget the past, like you said. And my birth even was very harsh. I have a twin brother, and we are the last of 6 kids. And my mom was older and not in the best of health. And when I was born, I they had to resuscitate me. I had the
Mm.
umbilical cord around my neck. My brother came out first and was actually an easier birth. Um, and I just felt like, and I didn't realize this until I started working with you and Lacey. But wow, there's the first big feelings of fear and abandonment. I
Mm.
mean, and I feel like my energy became very entwined with my mother's, and I've had to work through a lot of that. So just a very rough birth and basically dying and resuscitating. And the childhood, I had a lonely childhood too.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the loneliness I feel and abandonment I feel was passed on, was taught. I mean,
Oh, yes,
my mother taught it me
most
because
definitely. Hmm.
yeah, she had when I really started talking to my older siblings, which is kind of a blessing. There's like 12 years difference between me and my oldest brother. So they had a lot more information about mom and dad and what they were like when they were younger. I mean, gosh, by the time I got in high school, they were retired. My dad was
Mm.
65. And yeah, mom had a really rough childhood, very rough and painful. And she kind of became overbearing trying to cope with abandonment issues. And then I was extremely shy as a child. So it
Yes.
just wasn't a great combination. And as a young adult, then, I think, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I was so shy that my dad, I must have come across as very weird because I just would hardly ever speak. And my dad would tease me trying to get me to come out saying, I can't get 2 words out of you edgewise. And by the time I graduated high school, I did have a couple of friends, but mostly my friends was my twin brother and my pets, really.
Mm.
Yeah. But I decided to go to college, which was plenty traumatic for a very shy person.
Right. Especially if
you
you're
know,
introvert, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I went to Iowa State and I was going to a different college than my twin brother because he'd received a scholarship. So we were separated for the first time. And my mom, bless her, was trying to help me. And she got me this peer ministry job at the Wesley Foundation, where I had to go knock on doors and talk to complete strangers, April, in my freshman year.
Oh my goodness.
And basically,
Compounding the trauma.
and you know what happened, and laugh because I can laugh at it now, but basically, I would get so nervous and so shaky. I would knock on a door and I'd go, I can do this, I can do this. And then I would freak out before anyone ever opened the door and I would just run and I would look for the nearest largest object I thought I could hide behind and I would just hide behind it. So I
Oh my
basically,
goodness.
I know, I took a peer ministry job and turned it into Ding Dong Ditch. To this day, I'm wondering, it's like, what did those people think when they saw this crazy haired woman running away and hiding behind them?
Oh wow. Yeah, and to bring it back to your mother and her, that's what happens with generational wounds, trauma, whatever you want to call it, is
Yeah.
that if a person isn't aware of it or witnessing that for themselves, if they're still in that reactionary mode, then they continue to pass it on to the kids. And then it depends on, just like you said, between you and your twin brother, right? Twins, right? Sharing the same womb, and
Mhm.
yet you're vastly different.
We
So it's the
are.
perceptions, right? It's how we internalize and how we take on things, and how you said you related more to your mother and you took on her wounds and things. So that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? People might think ancestors like cavemen or something. No, this is just 2-3 generations ago,
Yeah.
which is linked back to, you know, the root, the ancestors, because all of that, you know, it just compacts on, it keeps building onto that. So
Yeah.
Marybelle, so as you shifted, or what was that shift to where you could knock on doors without running away? How did you build that up in yourself? Because I'm sure there's people here listening that could relate to that or know somebody who has experienced this.
Well, honestly, it took me years. That job, I only lasted 2 months because I felt so guilty for collecting a paycheck that I wasn't doing what I should be doing. And so I finally went to the minister and said, I can't do this. And he was very understanding and very wonderful, wonderful man. And so that ended that. But I went, gosh, I went to a psychic counselor, but she was a counselor and a life coach, and just for years, who helped me to kind of come out of my shell and realize, you don't have to be a doormat. You can, to be useful, and to realize that these core wounds, it's like you said, when you're not aware that this is where you're operating from, and I
Mm,
wasn't seriously until I got into my late 30s did I even begin to get an inkling that these wounds were were not just mine. They were from
yeah.
all these generations of particularly the women in my family. And when you're not aware that that is in the background, then you keep attracting, your decisions keep attracting those painful experiences instead of helping you to get through them. And you keep feeding the wound.
It's
And
true.
yeah. And then we end up stuck in those patterns. And I think that's something this lifetime, I will keep working through. I feel like I've come a long ways in healing a lot of it, but there'll always be layers that bubble up at really odd moments.
Yes.
And you just have to take a pause and
Mm,
go and just ask yourself, okay, what exactly is happening here? Because a lot of times when I would start it's like I had these memories feeding through my mind and I never really thought about them. I just reacted.
Yes.
And when through the counseling and through other numerous spiritual teachers, yourself included, when I began to realize, when I began to slow down and think, what is this? And when I started writing it down, and I would go back and
Mm.
read it and I go, wait a minute, this never happened to me. What is this storyline? I've never had anything like this happen. And that's when I really realized, oh my gosh, this is my mom's story, or this is my grandma's
Oh,
story.
yes.
Yeah. So that,
I love that. I love that you had the courage to sit with it and question,
yeah,
because I think a lot of people, that is where they have a lot of resistance about. It's just, no, I don't need to go back. I don't need to be with this because it's so uncomfortable, and you feel it. And we don't want to feel those feelings, although that's where the answers are.
it
And
is.
and that you sought help and you had a counselor, somebody to help you walk you through it, is so important. And this is what I want to say to everyone who's listening here, is that to seek outside help, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a counselor, a psychologist, whatever that is that you feel that you need at that time, to give you a foundation to build off of, because that's what you're doing. And
Yeah.
then you start to realize, oh, I'm doing pretty good. What's then you can look for the next step. Then you
Yeah.
can um, really witness that growth that you are building, because only you can do this for yourself. I'm speaking to everyone. So thank you for saying that, Marybelle, because a lot of people, I think, are just kind of stuck in that, and then they have those ruminating thoughts and those visions popping in and out, and they are wondering what's wrong with me and why am I this way? I want to be happy. I want to live a joyous life. And yet I feel way down over here and it's so far to get over there. There's a huge gap there.
And you have to,
So besides counseling, what were the other little steps that you took to work towards,
you
or
know,
I should say down into, because it's kind of like a spiral staircase, right? We kind of spiral walking down into ourselves once you realize it's safe, yeah, to
yes,
do so.
have to get yourself to a safe physical place so that you can let the guard down for all the emotions and the spiritual. And that's what, because my ex-husband, he he never told me, but he, when he met me, he was sober, but he'd just come out of rehab.
Oh,
And so several years later, he relapsed, and he relapsed with meth. So I
oh.
was not in a safe environment whatsoever. Um, so once I got separated from him, I bought this teeny tiny house and I loved that house because it was like a safe haven for me. And I took like 5 or 6 years, and I didn't care about dating. I went through tons of self-help books until like about divorce and about spirituality. And I think that's when I started my meditation practice, which I
Mm.
think now, because at first it's like, I've sat for 3 minutes. I can't stand this. Oh my gosh. And now when I first hit 5 minutes, I'm like, that's an accomplishment. And now I can sit for like an hour and just be totally happy. But meditation, I can't stress that enough,
Mm-hmm.
because um, that's really what taught me all these emotions that are so traumatic, and you don't want to sit with them. You're afraid. I was afraid if I sat with my hurt too long, that it would never go away. I would just,
Say that again, because I think a lot of people have that preconceived fear
yeah, I was terrified that the more I would sit with these negative anger and hurt and sadness, that it would never leave me. I would just get bogged down in it and it would never go away.
Was that true?
No, no. There were some times where it took a while, took a long time, but always emotions change. They are literally, they're not the true you. They're just passing through. And I just got, so I envisioned it passing through on a movie screen in my brain
They're
and going,
not
well,
the true you. They're just passing through. You need to write that down. I love that.
and
Yeah, because the emotions are going to come. We're emotional beings.
yeah. And I think the emotions, well, obviously they're there to tell us stuff, but they're not there. We let them, they're not there to truly form our reality. We're
Mm.
the one, our spirit beings are the ones that say, okay, so that emotion is telling me I really don't like this situation. But so now let's come back to the self and what steps can I take to say, okay,
Yes,
let's change it.
right? That you have a choice. It's,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
these emotions are coming up to signal to say, oh, this is where you're at. And just as you said, just to bring yourself back and ask, okay, which way do I want to go? And also I want to pause right here and remind everybody that when we talk about spirituality or spirit, it's spirituality is not a religion. It's about a relationship that you're building with yourself.
Yes.
So religion, I'm not bashing it or anything. It's a good like guidepost for people that feel that they need that in that community, and it's lovely. Although you can be spiritual and religious as well. So spirituality just takes you at a deeper level to yourself. This is where the healing begins, as Marybelle, you are so beautifully explaining and sharing. And then also spirit, when we say spirit, think of your higher power, whether that's God, Jesus, Gaia, Mohammed, whoever you believe your higher power to be, whenever we say the word spirit. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I just needed to just say that so people weren't getting too distracted, because people hear different words and then there's triggers tied to that too. And that can also be generational woundedness and trauma there as well.
Well, because you know, you spoke about your Native American heritage, and I have to be honest, for my whole life, I kept thinking, I wish I had like some kind of root native, some kind of Native American or just Native people, because mom and dad, and I think maybe because my grandparents on my mother's side were immigrants from Denmark, they came through Ellis Island, but they never spoke about family history. I mean,
Mm.
I took a soul parts and healing class, Nordic soul parts and healing class from Kari Toring, amazing class. And because she would have us, she would, every week she would pose a question. And one week it was journal about your family status where you grew up. How do you think your mom and dad, and then journal about how you think they were accepted in the community and about your family and the family's patterns, you know, behavioral.
Yes.
And I hate to say it, I sat there and I'm like, I don't know. So I
Mm.
called my older sister who's 10 years older because I figured, well, maybe, you know, since she's got that age, so she'd have more maturity when I was a little kid. And I asked her these questions. Actually, it helped my sister and I to build a really strong friendship because these deep questions about my family history would come up, and I'd call her or I'd call Grant because they were older. And so every week I'd call her and she'd go, what's the word of the question this week? You know? And we had some really great discussions. But when I asked her, I said, did mom and dad ever share any family history, like, habits or traditions? And she flat out immediately she went, no. And
Yeah.
I think that leaves such a huge gap. There are all these generations, we didn't have the guidance of our elders because they were being taught, get rid of all that old stuff. It's not any good. But yet
Hmm.
you need to know it, and
Yes.
it's not all bad. And so if you
Or, yeah, or I'm
oh
sorry to interject.
go ahead. No.
When you said that, or when they came over to this new land,
Mhm.
that the old traditions were frowned upon, that other people,
Yes.
the new communities, because it was such a quote unquote like melting pot, so many different, right, people were coming over, that they lost that because they were so forced to conform to this new land, and they had to work and they had to do all these things to get established, and that's fight or flight right there.
Thank you. Yes, that is it exactly. And I know, like, my grandma Christensen, she never really became happy over here. She was
Yeah.
always sad and missed her friends in the old country. So,
Yes.
yeah. And so that was interesting to me. And I think that's where I first started getting the inkling that it's like, and the stories I do remember mom and dad telling were never really very pleasant. So
Mm.
I did kind of grow up thinking, yeah, my relatives are jerks. and and now I've gone back and I talked to more of them and I realize, oh, they're perfectly nice, wonderful people. Where was my head?
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of patterns that Kari really helped all of us in the class work through by looking at these things and the different questions she'd pose every week. So
That's great. Somebody, again, somebody to guide, to give support, to help,
yeah.
uncover these lost treasures, really.
Well, and it goes back to, if you think that all your relatives are jerks, well, then you're thinking you're a jerk, and that's not healthy. And
Mm.
Kari also helped me realize, kind of segueing back to when I said I wish that I had some kind of native people roots. And she's like, well, we all do, silly.
Mhm.
That's why you're studying the Nordic soul parts and healing, because everyone has shamanic roots. We all came from these small villages. And I don't know why I didn't realize that. It was just buried so deep. And that just opened
Mm.
spiritual. I feel like it opened my spirituality to go, oh, it's all right there. I just have to be calm and tap into it. And that,
Yes, without the judgment, just being curious and open to see what unfolds.
yeah.
Yes. So, Maribel, I mean, we're, if you all haven't recognized this, that we're very dear friends. And so she's shared so many different stories and wonderful connections that she's made, or aha moments, as she's been exploring and working through her ancestral lineage. And there's one story that I would love for you to share about the Black Heart.
Oh, this past summer, I was actually going through a book about healing. It's called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home, and it's all about healing that abandonment wound. And I've been working not just with myself, but I felt like with the spirits in my backyard, my ancestors. I mean, I would take this book outside and I would read it out loud. I read every word of it out loud because I felt like there were other spirits there listening. And it healed me. But it's about healing abandonment patterns with yourself and your ancestors. And I just kind of stumbled. I wanted, as I got to the end of the book, I wanted a ritual that really would help me to open up healing for myself. And I was playing with our dog. I was playing fetch, and it suddenly dawned on me we had this old dead stump, and wasps had moved into it, yellow jackets. And, we'd gotten it down to the ground, but then when we mowed in that area, we're getting stung. So I had the wonderful job of digging those roots out. Wasps. But so it dawned on me, it's like, well, this is a perfect representation. So I took a big chunk of that root.
Yeah.
And
It's a symbolism of what? It's a perfect symbolism of
representing all the abandonment wounds that have gone on for generations, particularly in my mother's family, and saying, okay, we're taking out this rot and this anger and hatred that have built up in here, and we're going to transform it. And so I decorated that, and I did energy work over it, and then I had a sacred fire ritual. And it's amazing because when I started that, I get these pictures and these voices, I think we all do, running through our head. And I just felt like all these old ladies like doing finger pointing, going, hey, I didn't start this abandonment thing. You did it to me. It's your fault. And I literally had to go, okay, enough, ancestors. It's nobody's fault. I felt like these are just wounds that happen over the course of lifetimes, and sometimes instead of being able to heal them, that energy gets stuck. So I'm trying to get it unstuck and to move through, let it move through our bodies and the lineage. And because otherwise it just festers from generation to generation.
Yes, just as you experienced with your mother, and you took on her stuff. I can witness that for myself, when you're willing to go there and be there and recognize this isn't even mine, right?
Yeah. And so the first fire didn't burn the stump completely. And I sat there and drummed for a long time, and I worked, and I realized, and the spirits told me, it's like, yeah, this isn't going to burn down this time.
And isn't that true though? Like, as we're working through these layers, like it's just not going to go poop and poof, everything just magically disappears. It takes time. It to release it, to kind of melt those outer layers to get into there. So what happened?
Well, what was left, the charred piece that was left, looked like a human heart. I mean, it did. I took pictures of it.
I so love it.
Yeah. And so I dubbed it the Black Heart Ritual. And I sat with that because I did that on a full moon. I sat with that until the next full moon, and I did the Reiki. I just, every day I would hold that heart. And this is where my current husband is absolutely wonderful, because I walked in with this charred piece of wood, and he's like, what you gonna do with that?
What you up to now, Marybelle?
Yeah, I'm gonna do Reiki on it. And he's like, well, just don't get a bunch of soot everywhere. So yeah, and it ended up being so beautiful because I felt like I was able to contact my twin brother and his wife, which for me takes a lot of courage, because with family, gosh, you got to be careful how you approach them, because even though you all grew up in the same household, you're all coming from different angles and different interpretations. And he's very scientific, but I mentioned what I had been working on, and they're like, well, could you somehow share that ritual with us? Yeah. So I did a recording of part of it and talked to them. And wow, that just shifted so much, because I talked about feelings of abandonment, and then for me, what are new, healthier behavior patterns, and what does that look like for me? And
Hmm.
yeah, and so one of the big things was community. I mean, somehow we have to build healthy community for ourselves. Can be totally small. I mean, my community I feel is really small, but it's hard because you're going back over all this inherited and past stuff. And I found out, when I did this ritual, which made me really nervous because most of my rituals, I'm alone, I'm in my backyard, I'm just with me and the spirits and nature. Um, but he was like, I have trouble feeling like I'm part of community too. He says, I felt
Um,
like an outsider. So I decided, well, I will record part of this and share it with you. And then I was like, don't make fun of me with my, our rituals are they deep. And he didn't. Actually, they were so, they're like, it spoke to them too, to him and his wife, because they
uh,
have feelings of, we want to be part of a community, but we feel like a lot of times we live in a society that doesn't even truly represent us. So
yes,
yeah, how do you find your community? And
exactly.
yeah, and I felt like, well, so I went to that question. Most of this ritual, I was just talking to them and myself. And I'm like, so I guess for me, it means I have to behave in a way that I am maybe a foundation corner of the community I want to be a part of. So I have to offer community
Yes,
to get it.
that's it.
Yeah. And it really opened my eyes to, wow, a lot of my isolation, when I really now go back and think about the situations, it's like, oh, it was kind of self-inflicted because that's what I was taught,
Right. Then we realize that and we dust ourselves off, and this
Oh,
is when the compassion and kindness to ourselves comes in, to recognize that. But Maribel, also I want everybody to hear, and I hope people kind of keyed into that, when you were transparent and vulnerable,
mhm.
when you allowed them to see you and to actually even to reach out to connect with them, to talk to them, to approach them about this, that is vulnerability. That's being real. That's being authentic. And people are so, they really want that. They want those genuine connectedness. They crave it. And instead of the superficial, oh, how's the weather? And, just talking about the news or, what have you, we can go deeper than that. And with those relationships, it shifts the energies, and it allows you to go deeper and to feel not abandoned, right?
Yes.
Because really we're abandoned from ourselves.
Yes.
That's
Oh,
what's that's what's happening is because
exactly.
we've locked ourselves out because we're so worried about everything else that's happening around us, or what are people going to say, or I need to do this to show my worth, or I'm obligated. This is all the mind telling us, or we're looking at social cues for that, and we're not really validating our true authentic selves. And that's exactly what you did. And that's, just witnessing that and knowing that you are forging amazing relationships now.
Well, and honestly, because we have established through the ding dong ditch that I'm pretty introverted and pretty shy. So a lot of times I'll be timid about speaking up. So when I started this process, I just told myself, well, you know what? I'm gonna work with basically my ancestors that have already passed away. My parents and because that'll be more like I've been working in the spirit realm with the spirit, unseen energies. That'll be more my style. And what immediately happened, April, was the more I started being honest and just going, yeah, this is the true me. I instantly saw shifts in my living relatives and our relationships, because my siblings and I, we really weren't speaking or communicating much at all anymore. And it wasn't that anything terrible happened. It was just that each one of us had this, nobody loves me, I'm all alone.
Mm,
And
the abandonment.
yeah, it was the abandonment. And now we get together yearly just to make sure, because we've already lost Glenn. He's my middle brother. And so and I've seen the healing in the nieces and the nephews, and how everybody's talking more and they're doing things
That's
together.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you build that community, even with, and it sounds strange, people might think, well, how is that, with your own family? But that happens. People get estranged.
Yeah.
Although I love also how you work your creative style. You're so creative. Although you only do candles for your personal use and for friends and family, which they are amazing. But your own creative sense of creating the hygge shawls. Can you talk about that? How you've worked with the hygge and actually what it is first, and then how you're working with that to also bring in that community.
Well, the further I go down this path of just trying to tune into emotions and energies, this was when I was taking Kari's class. One of our soul parts is Hugin. Um, it- Odin's story of Hugin and Munin, his crows. It's an analogy for Hugin is thoughts, Munin is memories. And the word hygge means happiness. And the synchronicity that happened was the exact time that we started talking about this particular, our thoughts as a part of our soul. Um, my nieces said, hey, we found this hygge shawl pattern, and hygge is all about happiness and cozy.
What?
It was at the exact same time.
And yes, that is a thing, right? It shows up.
Yeah, and so I have become fascinated. In fact, I have one here I'm doing for my sister. Do you want me to hold it up?
Yes, please. And
It's
those who need to just tune in to the YouTube video so you can see Marybelle and see the wonderful work that she's doing.
so I crochet a shawl, and then I cross stitch patterns on top that I feel
Oh, that's
represent.
beautiful. Look at that.
And this
It's
is
a
my
gray background with peacocks
she
and
requested birds
bird
because
houses and
she loves
chickadees.
her birds.
Oh my goodness. Look at you, Marybelle.
And the thing about these shawls,
Oh,
I do a lot of,
butterflies.
yeah, I do a lot of prayer and singing over them, because Hygge is about happiness. And so I envision when you wrap the shawl around you, because my thoughts can easily swing from fear to trauma and so, to joy, but bring your thoughts in. If you've had a rough day, bring them in and know that you wrap yourself up and everything's going to be okay. Just bring them in, calm them down, get your thoughts back to your center and your happy heart. So yeah. And
So literally, whoever has that hygge shawl, because you have put those intentions and that energy and that time and love and commitment as you're working on it, they just wrap themselves up in that, and they can feel the love and the compassion and kindness and support.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Marybelle.
thank you for allowing
And
me.
I'm just saying this right now. You're gonna shrink back into your little shell when I say it. But I have a feeling people are gonna reach out to you saying, "Can you make me a hygge shawl?" Because it is really, really nice. Very
Oh,
nicely done.
oh, thank you.
You can
Yeah.
tell you put a lot of time and energy and thought into what you're creating there. It's just not something you're throwing together. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, and I hope I get the chance to make many of them, and just for all the loved ones in my life, because it's just it kind of crosses the bridge for me. You were saying that, we're all taught that if we can't contribute something, oh, what are we worth? And that's so
Mm,
not true. But because I have had my worth, my self-worth tied up into I must physically be doing something for most of my life. So it's
yeah.
still hard for me to let that go. And so at least,
Yes, I can raise my hand to that as well.
yeah, so at least when I do like candles or something like this that's slow and methodical, and it just makes me feel like, okay, maybe I'm bringing in a part of loving spirit. This is how I bring it into the physical realm. So
Ah, that's just beautiful, Marybelle. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you also, my friend, for having the courage to be with us here today, to accept the invitation to share your story and to be seen. This is something huge, and I'm very honored that you are here with us and that you are sharing and being like a way shower for other people as well.
oh wow. Well, I know. I was really surprised when you asked me, and I was nervous instantly. And my Tom is going, just treat it, just have fun. It's just a conversation, you and
This is
April.
what we're doing.
Yep. So, but yeah, you just make such a safe space that it's like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can talk about
Oh,
good.
yeah, we're just getting together.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And keep doing you, and those that are curious, even though Marybelle, she has a 9 to 5 job, right? This is things that she does on the side for herself.
Yeah.
Although you've said that you are open to connect with other people who want to maybe explore or continue this conversation.
I am, because that's so much of how I learn. In just hearing other people put these thoughts and ideas into different words, and it really does help me to understand more deeply
Yeah.
about just energy work and healing and love and building community. That's a
Yes,
thing for me, is building safe community. Yeah.
it's true. Very true. And it sounds like you're really feeding your soul too, as you're connecting and building community, and
Yeah.
that you're just the ripple effect.
It is the ripple, and I was just so amazed. It's when it immediately started changing things for the better with all of my relatives and me who are still alive, and I was like, whoa. I was just doing a whoa, what is this?
Yeah. And that's when you say, how can it get better than this?
And then it keeps getting better.
It does, right? Surprisingly, it does. So beautiful. Thank you again, Marybelle. I so do appreciate you
Thank you.
um, being here and speaking your truth. I know that's not easy sometimes. So, and for those who are interested in becoming part of your community, what is your contact information? What's the best way to contact you?
Probably by email. And my email is spelled kind of goofy. It's wisdomseeker@gmail.com. But
Okay, I'll put it in the subject line,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
we'll have it at the bottom of the screen too.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
if people are interested, If you take a look at Kari's class about Nordic soul parts and healing, I would love to retake this. So,
Okay.
I think it works better with a small group of people rather than a one-on-one, because then
Sure.
you get exchange of ideas. So,
Yes. And also we'll include the list of books and those links for Kari, so that way people can explore that for themselves as well.
yeah, because there's really like 3 books in Kari's classes that really launched me on, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do to heal this
Mhm.
isolation wound, this abandonment wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage and commitment to yourself, my friend.
Oh, thank you for having me. I just
Yeah.
love you so much, April. Thank this was
And I
this
love
was
you too.
awesome. It's easy
And
because
thank
it's not. You made it easy.
yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please hit subscribe so that way I know what you're interested in. If you want to hear more about this or any other topics to wellness, please feel free to reach out, send me a message, or connect with me through my website, livingwithintention.co. Until next time, be well, my friends. Bye.